folks, welcome to another episode of the Jason Wright Show, Mindset Monday. This is where I just want to kick your week off on a good start by focusing on mindset. So much of what we do when we go into the week, when we go into a meeting, when we go into a day, has to do with the mindset that we enter with. And so these episodes, which I'm committed to doing for 8 weeks, to just see how it goes. It may continue, but I'm going to at least devote 8 weeks to making sure that we do a Mindset Monday every single week for 8 weeks. And today, I'm getting a little help from Mark Manson. If you don't know who Mark Manson is, he kind of got really famous for, I think it was his book, The Art of Not Giving an F. And so that's who he is. Check out his works. I actually subscribed to his newsletter for a while, and it has a lot of great content. He's a good thinker. And one of the things that he just posted here recently on LinkedIn was this, that I wanted to be kind of the leap off point, the jumping off point for Mindset Monday. This is going to be the theme, okay, for me for this week. All right. And I hope that you take this and you can find it applicable to your week. All right, here it is. Here it goes. All right. So I open it up, and here's what I read from Mark Manson. You only envy the lives of people whose sacrifices you cannot see. You only envy the lives of people whose sacrifices you cannot see. So often we see people that we see the overnight success that was 10 years in the making. We don't see what goes on behind the scenes. And so my mindset for this week is going to be this. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, thank God, because there's not many rooms where that can be said. But I can make sacrifices that make me one of the most prepared and able people in the room. I can make sacrifices that will lead to success that help overcome my shortcomings that are based on my natural giftings. There is story after story after story about athletes who brought this into reality. Don Mattingly, one of the best baseball players that ever swung the bat, Donnie Baseball, first baseman for the New York Yankees. I remember reading when I was a kid that he used to take 500 swings off a tee before every single game. Dennis Rodman was known to not be the best shooter, but one of the best rebounders that ever lived, if not the best rebounder that ever lived. And one of the things that was always said about Dennis Rodman was that he never got tired. He had boundless energy. Well, one of the things that Dennis Rodman did at the end of every single game, after he had played a basketball game, he would go get on a stationary bike and ride for like an hour. Nolan Ryan, who was throwing fastballs almost 100 miles per hour, over 100 miles per hour into his 40s. After he would start a game, at the end of the game's over, he would leave and he would go work out after the game. This is how legends are made. It doesn't happen overnight. What we see are the results of all the things that not any of us really want to do. It's the sacrifice that they do when no one is looking. So Tim Ferriss is one of the most successful podcasters of all time. And I remember whenever I first discovered Tim Ferriss, it was after I'd read the 4-Hour Workweek, and I was just looking through podcasts for the first time. This is, over 10 years ago. And the first podcast that I ever subscribed to was the Tim Ferriss Show. And the only reason why is because I was like, oh, that's that guy that wrote the book I just read, The 4-Hour Workweek. And before you knew it, it seemed like Tim Ferriss just blew up. I'm like, this is crazy. How did this guy I get it, he wrote a book, but a lot of people have written books, and some of them, it looks like they have podcasts, but why is Tim Ferriss so successful? Why is he like the king of podcasters? Because he's not exactly the most charismatic guy. He's smart, he's sharp, but what is it? Why is he so freaking big in podcasting? Well, fast forward a few years later, and I meet Dr. Michael Eads, the author of Protein Power, who I went to business school with Dr. Eads' son, Ted. And Dr. Eads was kind enough to come on my show, and it turns out that he was friends with, or is friends with, Tim Ferriss. And one of the things that Dr. Eads said about Tim Ferriss whenever he wrote his book and he started his podcast and he started trying to create content and become the Tim Ferriss that we all know today is that he was a shameless tireless self-promoter. Now, Tim has talked about some of this. Tim has said that he would go to networking events. He would go to conventions and he would meet people and say, I'm writing this book. Would you please read it? Would you please check it out? And he would do everything he could to meet people and talk about his book. And he would give copies away of the 4-Hour Work Week. And it was rejected, I think, like 27 times from 27 different publishers. But he just was relentlessly self-promoting. And Michael Eads, Dr. Eads confirmed this. He said back then, Tim was relentless. He would call and ask you to talk to him and ask for advice. And he would just call and he would just work. Now, most of us, we just know Tim Ferriss as Tim Ferriss, the guy that makes it now look so easy. He makes this thing I'm doing look so easy, yet he's so freaking successful at it. I'm talking about Tim Ferriss. I'll never forget whenever I'd been listening to his show for a little while. And if you know anything about the history of Tim Ferriss, his first episode was with Kevin Rose, and they were talking. Now it's a regular installment of the Random Show where Kevin Rose comes back and they talk. And Kevin Rose at the time wanted to call the show Tim Talk. And I think it's just these two guys. That first episode was just them drinking wine at Tim's house, getting a little bit loopy, and just shooting the bull. There was really no context or content there, just these two guys talking. Tim was taking a break from writing the 4-Hour Chef. It was one of his books that just kind of just wiped him out. And that's one of the things that Tim has talked about too. That's another thing. Tim Ferriss, who has had some of the biggest selling books of all time, he hates writing books. They exhaust him, and he never wanted to do it again. And so whenever he was just kind of in a moment of wanting to do something, since he certainly didn't want to write anymore, he decided to start a podcast. And now here he is, one of the greatest. If he never did another podcast again, he would still get 1 million downloads probably for the next 5 years. That's amazing. Trust me, as someone who's been podcasting for 7 years and has not even scratched the surface of Tim Ferriss' success, I know it is so freaking hard. So that is amazing what he has done. Stephen Pressfield talks a lot about this. Stephen Pressfield is the guy who wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, Gates of Fire, which is so good. I think actually Gates of Fire might be the book that 300 was actually based on. I'm not sure about that, but either way, Stephen Pressfield, great author, but more importantly, a great teacher, and he teaches you how to work, especially if you're a creator, you're creative. In his book, Turning Pro, as well as his book, The War of Art, he lays out that it's hard work and discipline and doing the things, making the sacrifices that other people just aren't willing to make. That's what can lend to so much of our success. These people do things that others just aren't willing to do. And that's what I want to do, is I want to try to be someone as I go into this week, and not just this week, but just in my life, that has this mindset that it's the sacrifice that matters. It's the sacrifice and focusing on that. It's that Nick Saban part of the process where you're focusing on the first 7 seconds off the ball over and over and over and over again that actually leads to the national championship. It's doing those things that others won't. It's what Tony Dungy titled his book, Uncommon. It's people that are willing to do uncommon things, which is sacrifice. And that's what we see. That's what we love. That's what we look at, is we're seeing the results. We're seeing the Mona Lisa after Da Vinci had painted it and struggled and kept on and kept adding and adding, was never satisfied. We see the finished result and go, wow, it's a masterpiece. We see the David carved and perfect and chiseled. We don't see the sacrifice that Michelangelo went through trying to carve out of this rough piece of marble this beautiful sculpture that has lived on through all of this time. One of my favorite stories that I guarantee you've heard of is the one about Sylvester Stallone whenever he wanted to make the movie Rocky. And he's broke.
To sell my dog. We didn't have enough food to feed. I said, one of us doesn't eat. It's either you, my wife, or the dog. One of us.
He is down to his last dime. So broke was he that he had to sell his dog. I love listening to Metallica, one of the best rock bands of all time. In my opinion, the best heavy metal band of all time. Please feel free to leave comments if you disagree. But one of the things these guys talk about is when they were so poor, they were all piled into some cheap, crappy loft in New York or San Francisco or somewhere, and they ate hand-on-white bread sandwiches, meaning they didn't even have enough money for meat. All they had was enough to eat the white bread out of their hand. That's all they had, but they kept going. It said that Eddie Van Halen, who you'd think, rock star Eddie Van Halen, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. You'd think that Eddie Van Halen probably went out and party balls and was just like a rebel and happened to be a real good guitar player. No, not the case at all. Eddie Van Halen refused to go out and party. He sat in his room by himself, teaching himself guitar licks, learning how to play guitar. Now, some of you listen to this, you're kind of like me. All right. Now, this is going to sound kind of braggadocious at first, but I want you to know I'm about to just completely tell on myself. Okay. So just understand. But when the story starts and you start to want to say, are you kidding me, dude? Are you really that arrogant? Understand, I'm about to tell on myself for one of my biggest weaknesses and one of my biggest disappointments in myself. Okay. So here we go. Some of us are blessed with a lot of natural talent. Some of you out there listening to this, that's your biggest curse, is you were just given too much talent. I know, because I'm one of those guys. I know. And you're like, wait, I'm sorry, Jason, I haven't noticed that about you. Well, just follow me along here. Whenever I was in high school, I was very good at football. I was a great football player. Hey, let me tell you something about this white boy. This white boy could run a 4.45 40. Funny story, I'm at the University of Arkansas talking to Danny Ford, and he says, now, it says here, you say that you can run a 4.45 40. And I'm like, oh, I didn't say that. My head coach, who was holding the stopwatch, said that, coach. That's what I wanted to tell him, but I didn't, because I was a scared young kid at 17 years old, and it was Danny Ford, national champion with Clemson. I just sat there and like, okay. And he said, now, I see you're looking at Stephen Foster University. Now, for those of you who don't know who Stephen Foster is, I think Stephen Foster wrote Old Susanna.
Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. I come from Alabama with the banjo on my knee.
Okay, it's a musical guy, like a musician. Okay, I was looking at Stephen F. Austin, the father of Texas. That's who that university is named after, not Stephen F. Foster. But so small is SFA that Danny Ford had it confused with Stephen F. Foster. But either way, I was recruited. I went to some good schools. I went to TCU, SMU, Baylor, OSU, wanted me to come talk to them. I didn't, because by then I decided where I was going to school, which was SFA, the smallest school that had offered me a scholarship, Axum Jacks. Okay? Most of you listening to this, unless you are in East Texas or went to school with me, you've never heard of SFA. That's where I decided to go. And here's what I thought in my mind. I thought my talent alone will get me through. SFA is a place where people don't really care about football. I'm really talented. I got this. It'll pay for 4 years of college. And I show up to fall camp, hot as hell in Nacogdoches, Texas in August. Oh my God, in the stadium. It was in a bowl, and it's AstroTurf. I think that we measured like 113 degrees one day while we were practicing. For some reason, John Pierce, the head coach, thought it would be a good idea to let us all know that it was 113 degrees on the field. But anyway, and in that first group, or my recruiting class, we're all lining up, we're doing our first drills, and there's this guy from Red Oak, Texas, Todd Wilson. And by the way, just wanted to mention, Todd Wilson has since passed. He got cancer, and what a shame, because let me tell you something about Todd Wilson. Todd Wilson was a walk-on. Here I was, full ride scholarship athlete, everything paid for. And by the way, what that meant was, in the locker room, I was up on the top level with these beautiful, nice lockers. Even a small school like SFA had really nice facilities. And the walk-ons, they were down in the basement. That's where their lockers were. They didn't even get to have the same locker room as us. Todd Wilson was a walk-on. And I remember he was just this unassuming, probably, I don't know, wasn't even 6 feet tall. I was 6'2", 4.45 40. At the time, weighing probably 205, something like that. I mean, just had all the giftings of a good football player. Trying to rest on my God-given talent made me one of the biggest failures SFA had ever recruited. I ended up redshirting while Todd Wilson, the walk-on, got a full scholarship and played in the place that was reserved for me. I ended up giving up my scholarship. Todd ended up playing for 4 years and got to play with a guy that ended up coming in the recruiting class after mine and playing. Maybe you've heard of him, Jeremiah Trotter. I was laughing the other day with someone. I was telling them, I said, now look, Jeremiah Trotter really owes his entire NFL career to me. And for those of you who don't know, he was one of the best linebackers that ever played in the NFL. Most of his time, if not all of it, was with the Philadelphia Eagles. The dude showed up to SFA, a grown man and a good kid by all accounts. I never knew Jeremiah, but from all my buddies that played with him said he's just a solid guy, was a good student, and just they loved him. And he showed up from day one. And I was laughing the other day telling somebody, I said, yep, wasn't for me giving up my scholarship, Jeremiah Trotter would not be the man he is today. Tongue is firmly placed in my cheek because I know that whether I had stayed or gone, I wouldn't have played because Jeremiah Trotter was there. So here's the difference. You have 3 different scenarios. You have Jason Wright, all the talent, but not willing to put in the sacrifice to match the talent to become really great. Todd Wilson, not all the giftings, but the work ethic and the willingness to do things that others won't. And he ended up playing 4 years of college football. But then you've got this really amazing quality. And some of you, this applies to. You're the Jeremiah Trotter. You have exceptional ability. Now, my question for you is, are you going to be a Jason Wright or a Jeremiah Trotter? Are you going to be a Jason Wright that has all the talent but does not have the willingness to put in the sacrifice to be great? Or are you going to be the Jeremiah Trotter that you've got the unbelievable God-given ability to be exceptional and you've decided you're going to make the sacrifices that match that unbelievable gifting to be exceptional? Because of the 3 of us, one, you never knew even played football till this day, probably. That would be me. The other, you probably didn't know he played football, but if you were at SFA back in the day, from 94 to 97, you knew Todd Wilson played football and you probably got to watch him crack some skulls on the field. But then you may not know about him because he played at SFA. But then there's another that you have a very strong likelihood of knowing who he was or at least heard of him. And you can go Google him at least and find a lot of information. And that's Jeremiah Trotter. The point being, if you have the mindset that you're willing to put in the sacrifice, and if you're one of those that has the God-given talent plus the sacrifice, boom, baby, that is gold. But even if you're the Todd Wilson and you don't have all the natural giftings, now, I don't want to take anything away from Todd. He was a good athlete, but he didn't get a full scholarship, right? There was something that was not quite there, but he was able to overcome it and then get that scholarship with work ethic and sacrifice and hard ass work. Which one are you going to be? Which one are you going to be the Tim Ferriss Tim Ferriss, now we know this about him as a podcaster. He has battled depression his whole life. He is short. He is bald. He's not a naturally athletic guy. He's obviously got a big old brain on him. But what he has is a work ethic and a determination that is unstoppable. It is the sacrifice we don't see. That's really what we're admiring. We just don't know it. We're admiring the finished product. A lot of the things that you see on social media, I'm going to give social media a little bit of kudos. A lot of the videos that you see that make life look so perfect, and we like to take kind of jabs at those, oh, life is not that perfect or whatever. Now, let me tell you something about these creators. Yes, they do make life look better than it really is a lot of times. Granted. But you know what? What we don't see in a lot of those 90-second videos are the takes and the retakes and the learning how to use the camera, the learning how to use the lighting. Go back and watch some Casey Neistat videos, probably the greatest vlogger of all time, the OG of vlogging. Casey worked his tail off for a 2-minute video. A 2-minute video would take him hours, days, weeks. It's unreal. The sacrifice that truly great people are willing to make. And my message to you today is, and to myself, by the way, right, understand something. Everything I say on this show, especially when it comes across like this, some kind of advice or whatever, inspiration, I'm talking to myself because I fail miserably a lot of the time, is that We all have the opportunity, should we choose to take it, to do the sacrifice, to help overcome the lack of natural abilities, and then hopefully yield the result of being great at something. Whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever it is, you don't have to be a professional athlete. You don't have to be a Tim Ferriss podcaster. You don't have to be a Leonardo da Vinci of a painter. But if you'll put in the sacrifice so that people look and go, man, that guy fathers beautifully. He makes being a father look beautiful. But behind the scenes, what they don't know is that you're reading about how to be a better father. Your head is in the Bible, figuring out how to be a godly man, how to be the image of Christ to your children, to be an amazing husband. God, look at him. He's so sweet. I mean, look, he's the best husband I've ever seen in my life. How does he do it? What they don't see is the sacrifice that you're making where, yeah, you see the outward, but what you also don't see is that I'm in constant prayer for my wife. When no one's looking, I'm up early. I'm journaling to her, letting her know how much I love her and trying to practice this thing called agape love, which is love as an action. It's not just, I'm not just relying on feelings. I'm not just being sweet to my kids when they're a football star and they're doing the things that I want them to do. And then if they don't perform, they don't do those things, then I'm going to have nothing to do with them. I'm going to shut them out. I'm not going to call them. I'm not going to have anything to do with them. Not that I know any people like this, but instead I'm looking like a good father because I do the things that other dads don't feel like doing. It can be applicable in every area of your life. Focus on the sacrifice, and then the outcome, the progress that we admire is really just going to be the result of, for you, for me, and anybody out there, it's just the result of all the sacrifices that no one saw. So with that, I am Jason Wright. Thanks for listening to Mindset Monday. Have a great week and come back here for the Wednesday interview, Friday freestyle, and then I'll see you again for another Monday Mindset. I'm Jason, and I'm out.